Welcome to the Thriving Farmers Podcast, where our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable and sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Today's episode is with Brandt Parker. Now, Brandt has been farming only a couple years, and he and his wife Erica run and operate the Sage Garden, a quarter-acre market garden outside of Columbia, Missouri. They focus on lettuce and other salad greens and currently sell their produce locally to grocery stores, restaurants, and a year-round farmers market. They use 30-inch permanently raised beds with wood chips in the pathways and try to use natural and sustainable practices. One of the cool things about this interview was getting the take from a very new farmer of how they have basically built their farm and some of the mistakes they've made as they've gone along. So we talked about, weed control. We talked about managing cropping and how a lot of times it's best to start off smaller and kind of scale up instead of starting with more acreage and learning the hard way that's a lot to manage. So hope you enjoy this episode and always looking forward for feedback. Today's podcast guest is Brandt Parker, and Brandt and Erica started farming with their daughter Amelia in 2017 at the Sage Garden, where they focus on year-round greens production as well as seasonal salad vegetables. Welcome to the podcast, Brandt.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
All right, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about your farm? Where do you guys sell, and about what size are you guys on now?
Yeah, so my wife, Erica, and I own and operate the Sage Garden. It is a 1/4 acre market garden just outside of Columbia, Missouri. Our farm began in 2017, so we are just beginning our third growing season.
Okay, and how much has changed over that time period?
It's been a pretty drastic change. Probably incomparable when looking at our first year just to our second, and then even this next upcoming year, our third. Our first year, we grew on 1 acre. We only sold at the farmer's market, mainly because we just grew so many crops and what we had week to week was so variable. Now, last year, starting in the spring, and especially once summer hit in the fall and this winter, we started selling to a lot of the local restaurants and grocery stores, catering companies. So I think right now we have about 15 accounts. Okay. And that's 10 restaurants, 5 grocery stores. And then we have the farmer's market. And this year, I'd say half of our sales came from the market, half came from our accounts. And I would think this upcoming year, it's probably going to be more like 75-25, 85-15. It's going to be even more drastic.
Oh, wow. That is really cool how your marketing is changing. So let's talk a little bit about, why do you farm? What was the initial draw? What got you into it?
Honestly, I think we just love the personal satisfaction and customer relationships. The farmers, restaurants, and farmers market, it's just a great community to be a part of and contribute to. And I can also say both my wife and I have different food-related health issues. So on many levels, farming makes sense and fits.
Yeah, I know that is such a key point as you start to get down that road of understanding food systems and your own health. And then you're like, well, I want to share this with other people in my community. So yeah, that's one thing for us too, that we really definitely, my wife and I both have different alternative diets, as you were to say. And so having our own food supply and working one-on-one with farmers is key for our health.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. All right. As a farmer, and especially as a beginning farmer, there's endless tasks to be done. How do you make sure to focus and tackle the most vital priorities each day? Because there's always that one more thing that can be done.
I personally can't speak enough on simplicity.
Okay.
We have a weekly schedule, and it is more or less static and repeatable throughout the season. We try our best to be proactive and plan ahead. So Monday, we make soil blocks and seed lettuce transplants. Monday and Thursday, we harvest. Tuesday and Friday, we wash, pack, and deliver. Wednesday, we transplant. And Saturday is our farmer's market. And that's a big portion of our time and the majority of our task. What we are left with is watering, bed turnover and preparation, pest management, direct seeding, and then any odd and end infrastructure type project we are working on.
Cool. Okay, so you have a really, really distinct schedule then. And then when you say soil blocks, is that how you're doing your lettuce transplants, or is that more for other crops that you're growing?
Yeah, so that is for our lettuce transplants, but I will say that we just got our P200 flats in the mail this week. So we're changing our system over. We realized the soil blocks was one of our big bottlenecks just in the time, you know.
Yeah, it does make a beautiful transplant, but there's so much time in putting those together and making sure the mix is the right moisture content and all of that. And when you were doing that, were you doing like 1 inch or 1.5 inch blocks for those lettuce transplants?
You know, there's 3 sizes, and it's the middle size. So is that?
Yeah, I think that would be probably, it's like a 4 long kind of mold.
Okay, so it's a little bit smaller than that one. So I guess it's the 1 inch.
Okay, yeah, that's probably what it is. Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. And it seems like it worked because you had beautiful greens all summer, but obviously it's the time aspect which is really causing that bottleneck.
Yeah, I think the only thing I could complain about was the time. But last year it was great for us. So
yeah, cool. All right, so let's talk about when you began your farm. What do you feel like were your biggest mistakes? And then what would you do differently if you were to like backtrack about 2 years ago when you're starting over again?
I jumped into farming a little too quickly.
Okay.
So being a new husband and father, farming was a lot to take on, and it took a little too much of both my time and energy. I'm still trying to find that work-life balance. It isn't that I regret starting the farm with little experience, because I think we have learned and adapted very quickly. But I definitely underestimated the stress and mental energy of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I also underestimated the challenge of keeping your work and other aspects of your life separated.
Yeah, I know that can be a challenge. So then, obviously the mental energy too was big there. Would you say that you started by growing too fast or, trying to do too much or?
Yeah, it was a lot of things, but I don't know if it was just being new business owners, my wife and I had just gotten married, and then our daughter Amelia, but we probably started too quickly, and we just put in a lot of time in areas that weren't making us any money, like, weeding, anything you'd consider waste, I suppose, or inefficient. We were spending a lot of time on that. So we were just exhausted, physically and mentally. And we didn't have our processes down or even our day-to-day schedule, or at least I didn't. So it was very much late hours, forgetting to do something and having to go back at night to complete it. Just all that stuff that is not sustainable.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. So tell us about who your mentors have been over your farming career and how it's helped you become the farmer you are today.
Honestly, all aspects of our farm have been adapted from other farmers, whether from conferences, classes, farm tours, or books. Our year-round lettuce production model is from Ray Tyler at Rose Creek Farms, from his conference as well as his online course. We designed our wash and pack station after watching one of Curtis Stone's videos, which I know can ultimately be traced back to you. Our permanent bed design and maintenance is from JM's book, minus the BCS tractor. And Ben Hartman's lean methodology has been very influential. Finally, we first saw and experienced wood chips being used in the walk paths on a market garden scale from a farmer's workshop in the area.
Cool. So tell me a little bit more about some of that. So the wood chips, do you use those in all your paths? How do you make that work for you?
Yeah, so where we're growing now was this originally grass. And to create the permanently raised beds, I actually trenched the walk paths,
okay,
1.5 feet deep. And so all that dirt went on the beds. In those walk paths, we filled them in with wood chips. So it was a lot of wood chips actually, but
Yeah. So would you say your land is really clayish? Is that why you did that? Or are you trying to look more adding a lot of organic matter and water storage down there?
Honestly, I just enjoy the aesthetics of it, of the wood chips, the weed control, but there is a lot of clay, and I love the idea of just the wood chips is kind of like long-term compost and fertility in a way. And then also if the huge heavy rain comes, the wood chips just absorb a lot of it. So it takes just a lot of just a lot of the weather fluctuations out, I suppose.
Yeah, and especially where you guys are located there in Missouri, you guys do tend to get some of those larger rain events, which can really, just drop a tremendous amount of moisture and cause a tremendous amount of flooding or runoff if you're not able to manage that. So that's a really interesting way you've done that and super cool.
Yeah. So wood chips in our walk paths, we have a lot of compost on our bed, and we've added a lot these first couple of years, just trying to get the soil texture right primarily. So it's very compost heavy. We're a more or less no-till farm. Okay. So I think that's what keeps the walk paths clean. I feel like some of the other farmers doing wood chips, their issue is like the soil gets kicked into the walk path a lot from tilling or preparation, and then weeds grow. But we only broad fork just a bed prep.
Okay, so you broad fork and then let's say use a tilther or use a rake or something, or how does that work?
Oh, so we broad fork and then compost and then just rake that out. And that's been a fine enough texture for us to plant in.
Oh, wow. So very no-till. Yeah, no. And the pictures on your website and not your website, your Facebook page are beautiful. So it's really working for you guys. So that's really super cool.
Thank you. Well, it's amazing what Photoshop can do, Michael. No, I'm just messing with you. I'm really happy with how our garden looks, and just the weed control and some of those different aspects have just made farming so much more enjoyable,
Yeah. So let's move on. If there was a magic reset button as it relates to starting your farm, what systems would you go back and put into place sooner rather than later? And it sounds like the wood chips is one of those that seems to have really worked for you guys. What else would you think that you'd do?
That's a little tough for me to answer because I think we have been pretty fortunate with our farm and timing and how quickly we've adapted.
Okay.
We quickly settled on focusing on our production on salad mix. And that was the end of 2017 when we made that decision. So really, we started planting lettuce each and every week the following year. And by the time it was ready to be harvested, we had the restaurants, grocery stores, and farmers market customers ready and excited to buy it. And here we are today. Now, I will say, with that said, we always seem just a step behind on our infrastructure.
Okay.
There's only so long you can store produce for the farmer's market and yours in your neighbor's fridge.
Yes.
You can only water 1/4 of an acre with a hose so many times. We have often been conservative and taken our time with farm investments and purchases. Now, it's been nice because we haven't regretted any of our investments, but it would have been nicer to have some things sooner. The walk-in cooler, our overhead irrigation, the landscape fabric, shade cloth, the salad spinner, they've all made life so much easier. And looking back, like, I don't know how we did it without it. And we probably couldn't have for much longer.
Yeah, I know, like when we first bought our barrel washer, and at the time we were doing probably about 500 pounds of roots a week. And it used to take, someone most of the day to wash that. And then after you buy a barrel washer, an hour later, you're done that 500 pounds. You're like, oh my gosh, I just now have 6 or 7 hours back. And it's absolutely amazing. And you're like, how could I go back? But realize that because for so long you just did it. So
yeah, you just get used to it. You just get used to it, I suppose. And, there's a lot of things, a lot of investments that I think everyone knows in the back of your mind you need to get to. You just push it off, and sometimes for longer than what you should.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? What kind of infrastructure are you adding to your farm now?
So the most recent, we put up 2 new caterpillar tunnels last year for the winter. So currently we have our 30 by 100 unheated greenhouse and then 2 caterpillar tunnels. For this year, our biggest thing is our wash pack station.
Okay.
We're just having it in like a mini caterpillar tunnel, actually, but we're going to have electricity in it, and it's going to have 2 salad spinners as well as a greens washer. So the greens washer is new. And I guess the only other thing so far is we just got the Jang seeder. It just came in the mail. So last year the first 2 years we used the Earthway, which has been fine. Mm-hmm. But last year we transplanted a lot of stuff. And I think this year we just realized that we're going to be direct seeding a lot more. Yeah. Really, everything that's not Salanova lettuce will be direct seeded. And we just realized that the time it would take to thin and just the different negative aspects of the Earthway, we decided to try the Jang and see how that did.
Yeah, no, I think you're going to be happy. So we used the Earthway for the longest time, and the only way we made it work is we actually modified a whole bunch of plates. So we bought like 3 or 4 different sets of plates and then either filed them down or taped over holes, and then we just had them labeled. So we had beet plate 1 through 4. And so it was different variations of the beet plate. And then, as seeds came in, we would size based on that. So that's how we made that work.
Nice.
Yeah. But the Jang is definitely such a step up because, you can have infinite adjustment when you start messing with the wheels and the gears and stuff. So yeah, I think you're going to be really happy with that purchase.
Yeah. And we are very happy to support Paper Pot Co. and all that they're doing. And, just trying to think ahead, there's a good chance like a greens harvester will be the next purchase, maybe.
Okay.
Once the season progresses, and once we're consistently direct seeding and growing those crops well, I think that will be a big help.
Cool. So crops, let's say like baby arugula and baby kale.
Exactly. So our crop plan, I can tell you about it real quickly if you'd like.
Sure.
So it is super simple. We are growing 3 rows of lettuce every week. It's like 225 feet worth. So we're estimating around 200 pounds of salad mix, give or take.
Yep.
And that's just the max. We can do 3 rows, and that's what will fill up our plot when it's all said and done. Now, in between those lettuce crops will just be other salad greens. Thinking off the top of my head, I assume it will be radishes, arugula, and then a row of like baby kale, tatsoi, beet greens, sunflower shoots, things like that,
Cool. So really, lettuce is your absolute biggest crop on your farm then?
Yeah. This is going to sound wild, but so like last year, we still grew a lot of lettuce. But we still had all of our tomatoes. We still had all of our cucumbers, peppers, and then odds and ends stuff like okra, green beans. And a lot of that was because we had a small CSA.
Okay. Yeah.
That we kind of hashed out really before we realized that we need that space for lettuce.
Okay.
But anyways, this year we're like all that stuff, even tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers. We're not growing them. Now, that's not to say we won't again down the road, because I know how profitable they are if grown well. But in my mind, since we have the market for lettuce and salad mix, I want to get as good at growing at that as I can and max out that market before venturing back. And if we ever do, and if I can add one more thing, that 225 pounds of salad mix, and I assume it'd be a little bit more than that if we added any of our auxiliaries with it. But honestly, Michael, that's accounted for. Like, that's sold.
Wow.
So when you're thinking about expanding, like if we had more space, let's just say we went to a half of an acre, first and foremost, I'd grow more salad mix, and I'd probably grow it to I just keep on going till I realized I was hitting that max. Mm-hmm. And then even after that, then I'd move the head lettuce.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole different market. Head lettuce to clamshells to grocery stores. And there's some restaurants that really prefer the head lettuce personally. So for me, I would much rather max out lettuce than focus on even something like tomatoes and cucumbers, which I know are people's cash crop.
Yeah. So I want to actually bring up an interesting point here because I know the market you're at. I know some of the vendors at your market, and someone there told me, I think at the same conference you were at with me at the end of 2017, they're like, oh, that's great for you, Ray, but I could never sell anywhere near that amount of lettuce in my area. And you're in the same exact market with them and you're starting to max out, and you added hundreds of pounds to that market since that statement was made, and you still say there's space in that marketplace. So it's really interesting that I think some of us who don't think that they have a market for that, I think the thing that's holding us back is we're not looking in the right places. We're not making the right connections, or we just don't have it consistent enough that people know they can get it from us and are willing to buy every week from us.
Yeah, I remember that. And that farmer is a very good friend and mentor of ours. That she's one of the first people we call with any issues, honestly. But yeah, it is interesting. And before the conference, Ray's conference in the fall of 2017, we had tossed around the idea of year-round lettuce. Like, I think we listened to a podcast on 4 different growers that were successfully doing it, and I think Selmer, Tennessee, Ray, someone in Arkansas. But anyways, so we had heard of it, but we just didn't know. I don't know. We didn't know if we could do it here in central Missouri. And now I know there are other farmers here in Missouri that do and do it well. But yeah, I don't know if it's just we dived in wholeheartedly. And from the get-go, when we decided to focus on lettuce, that's what the customers started thinking of us as. We were who people went to for salad mix. So yeah, we did have to reach out to a lot of restaurants and things like that. But by summertime, at least, when we were really the only ones that had it at that scale for restaurants, a lot of people were calling us and just asking if we had it available.
Cool. Yeah, let's move into talk about your marketing a bit more. You said you should get the farmer's market, and now you have a lot of the restaurants and grocery stores. How are you packaging that? Are you doing clamshells? Are you doing bulk?
So we do a few different things, and I think it's pretty similar to what Ray does. For our 5 grocery stores, we do clamshells. We do our salad mix in clamshells, and I think it's 1/4 pound.
Okay.
For the restaurants, the most common order is around 10 pounds.
Okay.
And now it will go from 5 to 20 pounds. But the average for most restaurants is around 10 pounds, either once or twice a week. But for them, we actually will pack it in our totes, and it has our name on it, and we just leave it with them. And that next week or that next delivery, we swap out.
Okay, cool.
And finally, sorry for interrupting, our farmers market, we do 1/4 pound bags as well, but we just do the clear bags with zip ties.
Gotcha. Okay. Now tell me about the restaurants you're dealing with. Are they all in that Columbia area, or you guys have to travel further?
They are all in Columbia or just outside, so the drive isn't far. There's a lot of really good local restaurants in Columbia, and a lot of new ones. Now, I would say, and I don't know if this is recent or this has been going on for a while longer, but everyone seems really interested in buying local. They support the farmers. And the chefs and restaurants, everyone is just very active in the community. So I could probably mention this now. Even prior to officially selling our product to them, to the chefs, we knew them all. And we were still, we'd still see them every week, whether it's at the farmer's market or potlucks or pop-up food events. So it was pretty easy to market. It wasn't, by no means, it was cold calling. It was very much natural. So even 6 months, let's say, before we planted our first lettuce seed, we'd already talked to most of the chefs that buy from us now just to see if they were interested, will you buy local lettuce, or are you happy getting it off the truck? Is there other vendors that do it year round? Because we don't want to take from them, if you currently don't have a supplier, we would love to. We would love to try our best to be that person. So when we finally got our product, it was more just following up,
Yeah. Now, do they order weekly or do they have standing orders or does it a mix of both?
We send out a fresh sheet, very similar to Curtis Stone's. That's where we first saw it. And Our deliveries this last year were twice a week, and just like a couple of days before, or at the beginning of the week, we would send out the fresh sheet and use in orders. We accept orders like up until the day before or something like that. So we send out an email weekly, but then if we don't hear anything, but we have a pretty good feeling the restaurant would like some, we'll go ahead and call, or most of the time just send a text message and, they'll reply, "Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't get a chance to reply. We'll take 10 pounds.
Gotcha. Now, are those restaurants just taking lettuce or are they buying other crops from you? And now that you're switching to just greens, are you thinking that they're just going to buy that from you?
It's mostly been all lettuce, and the only exception would have been our cucumbers and tomatoes last year. We sold a lot of our heirloom tomatoes and cherry tomatoes to the restaurants. But this year, I'm a little curious. I'm curious about a few things.
Yep.
I'm curious if the restaurants would be interested in just the lettuce mix or if they'd be happy with the auxiliaries. I think best case scenario, if they would like the mix of everything, that would be the best case scenario on our part. But our plan is to just sell lettuce to them, to the restaurants and grocery stores, and the farmers market will kind of be what's left. So the majority of the auxiliaries, and especially the radishes, that will all be for the farmers market, I assume.
Gotcha. Okay. That's really cool. And it's amazing how rapidly you've scaled that to that amount of lettuce, and especially in one city in the middle of Missouri, which is not particularly known for wanting to buy local. So I think, we have reached a point in the US at least where the Midwest is now interested in buy local. And as long as you present yourself well and have those relationships, that you've developed over the years. And I think that's something that farmers, even if they're not selling yet, can start doing, is going out and developing those relationships, going to the farmers markets, going to the pop-up food festivals and eating at those places, that know those chefs and kind of the local food scene. It's so much better when they are ready to, sell a product.
No, I completely agree. And in Missouri, I know there's a lot of very good farms and restaurants and grocery stores, kind of throughout the state. What first comes to mind is the farmers market in Springfield, Missouri, who our market is trying to emulate a little bit, just making it more of a community gathering and event rather than just food itself.
Yep. Now, you farm with your wife and your daughter. How do you divide roles on the farm? How'd you guys set that up? And do you focus on specific areas, or do you kind of just have a list of what needs done and you guys work down it?
Well, I'm inclined to first admit that my wife is better and quicker than me at most tasks farming related. I would also say there's a lot of overlap in what we do.
Okay.
But in general, especially last year, once my wife became pregnant,
okay,
this was even more so. But in general, I do most of the field task while Erica handles the record keeping, accounting, invoicing, and sales. And if we're pressed for time, we'll both harvest, wash, and pack.
Okay.
But like I said, there's a lot of overlap. I mean, she's just as happy to do any of the field tasks as well, if she's free and feeling well.
Gotcha. And then do you both do the marketing, or does one of you just take the delivery route, or how does that work?
Well, in general, it was my wife, but for the second half of last year, I ended up taking over the farmers market and deliveries. But she still made the calls and gathered the orders for me.
Gotcha. And, with that division, do you feel that works well for you guys? I mean, let's say you're to scale a little bit, and let's talk about, if you were to scale, would you start breaking off some of those tasks for that new person? Or do you feel like it's just the size you're at is good?
I would assume things would stay fairly similar. I would think the employee and I would do a lot side by side, a lot of the tasks, and especially the planting, harvesting, wash pack. I assume that my wife or I would still do the farmer's market and a lot of the deliveries, though not necessarily. And then my wife would continue doing the accounting side of things.
Gotcha. Cool. So let's kind of wrap this up here. If you're talking to new farmers, saying people that are just trying to get into to farming, and I know you're still relatively new, a couple of years in, what would you recommend that they focus on to get best success in their beginning years?
I have 3 things that I can say and recommend. One is your farm shouldn't be bigger than the weeds you can successfully manage.
Okay.
The second thing I would say is just to take your time.
Yep.
It's not worth the cost of jumping into something without being prepared and at least having an idea of where you want your farm to go. Now, I'm not saying everything needs to be in place, but I will say that at least with us, I have an idea of what investments and purchases will be needed at the different stages of our farm's growth. And I think that's a good place to be in. You don't want to be in the dark, you know?
Yeah.
And the third thing, which I don't think everyone likes this one, but this has been the case for us, but I'll just say you will never regret focusing your production on a few key crops. You can always expand later on. And you know, if you love variety, you can always have a small garden for your family and friends. But with a market garden, I think focusing on a few crops and perfecting them is the quickest way to ensure a consistent, regular product for your customer.
And I think what you said that there is super important, that consistency, because if they know that every single week they can get the same thing from you, then they are prepared to spend that money every single week, and they show up to your stand first.
Yeah, to me, it's the only way. I mean, especially with restaurants and grocery stores, for sure.
So if you could pick one, what would be your favorite farming tool?
You know, there's so many I love. For example, the salad spinner, that's been huge. I know that's not necessarily a fun one, but it's been unbelievable just how much it's helped. I will say that I have an all steel metal rake.
Okay.
When I used to work with my neighbor, that was the rakes he used for landscaping. So that's how I found out about it. But that's probably one of my favorite tools. I mean, just because I use it for everything, whether it's bed preparation, cleanup, wood chips, compost, just anything and everything.
So that's kind of like your go-to. And so you say that's how you do a lot of your bed prep as well.
Yeah. And it's not the standard like 30-inch wide aluminum one. They make it in all steel. The brand's like Dura, but it's super heavy. So I just got like a 24-inch wide one and it works fine. To me, I'd rather have something that's multi-purposed and can be used for anything, at least for the rake.
Gotcha. So if someone were to ask you, I'm thinking about getting into farming, would you say now is a great time to get into farming? And if so, why?
I think so. The technology available to farmers is great, and I presume it will only continue to improve. For me, with all of the tools, courses, and information available, it seems feasible for anybody to have both a successful farm and a good quality of life. But it also depends on your context. Our community in Columbia is amazing. It's so unique and small and vibrant. There's a lot of restaurants and customers that value and appreciate local food and enjoy knowing their farmers. But I realize not everywhere is that way.
So you would say then you need to kind of find your community, the one that's excited about that and interested in that, and then just focus on building those relationships.
Yeah, and I'm sure you probably know this more than anyone, but there's a million different ways to run a farm. And you've probably seen successful farms in every city, town possible, I mean, so it probably just depends on how creative you want to be and how creative you can be for if it will work for you.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And obviously, as you said, the hardest part of a lot of farms is that marketing side. And yeah, I mean, I here in Ohio, a lot of people said, oh, yeah, people aren't interested in local food. And we have several very vibrant farms near us within 15 minutes that are doing a great job and sell out of their CSAs. And we even have one farm that's traveling 2 hours to Columbus, where someone told me 6 months ago, oh, yeah, there's nothing going on in Columbus. No one's buying local food. And it's such a strong market for this one farm. They're traveling 2 hours to get there. So I think it really comes down to, as you said, being really creative, looking for what the market wants, and two, asking, the farmers what they're doing and saying, okay, what other opportunities are out there in this community that people might be wanting to focus on and people wanting to eat. And then start asking customers too. One of the things we're actively doing right now is we're getting ready in the next couple of years to put our own farm together. And so right now we're doing a lot of market research, and there's a ton of opportunity out there. It just, as you said, you have to be creative. You have to kind of look at what's happening and how can I fit into that, and how can I start building a community and a tribe of people that want to purchase from me when I'm ready to sell them product.
Well, Michael, you seem to be wearing so many hats already. I couldn't imagine you adding a farm to the mix.
Well, it's going to be a fact of starting to focus less on some things and focus more on others. So, farming is my big love. We have a whole backyard that's all geared towards that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a little bit of a slow start. But I would say that in 3 or 4 years, that's going to probably be a pretty big focus of our time. It's going to be a very unique farm too. We really want to be a focus on education of both the community and farmers around the world. So it's going to be relatively unique. But yeah, it's going to take a couple of years to pull together because of all the things I do have going on. So,
Michael, I think what's neat is I'm starting to realize that all the technologies in farming, like salad spinner, for example, if you research deep enough, I keep finding your name at the beginning of it all, I think you seem to be in the backdrop of a lot of things, and we appreciate that.
Well, I just tend to geek out on things. I think that's my problem. But yeah, I mean, I love tinkering and geeking out. Again, it's kind of about how can we move this industry forward? And, just seeing some of the news articles that have come out recently, especially that one in China with the hogs, they're basically exterminating hogs because of diseases that are happening. And you feel such anguish for industry as a whole. And you also see the effects of climate change that are starting to have, this last couple of weeks with that massive deep freeze. And people are saying, well, it's not because of global warming. And it's because of climate change. It's because of the rapid depletion of organic matter in our soils, which cause massive changes. It's basically depleting the kind of buffer zone that we had. And, we're seeing that around the world. If you kind of bring that back, and that's kind of where my whole background comes from, this is, yes, I love growing food, but I also am worried about the world we're going to leave to our kids. And it's already getting scary. And so our goal as a company, and kind of where my personal mission is, how can we change that? And yes, it's a lot of the small scale, but it's also going to have to be on the large scale. And so that's kind of, some of the questions we're asking right now is, how do we start changing these 10,000 acre corn and soy farms? And I don't think I have the answer yet, but I know there's farmers out there that are thinking that way and do have some of those answers. And so again, that's what this podcast is for, is starting to bring forward the stories of people that are making it work on your scale at a half acre, but all the way up to the 10,000 acre farms, even bigger than that. But what I want to say too is that what you're doing is just as important, because you're also showing your neighbors what's possible. You're showing that it's possible to have a small acre farm and possible to do it organically. When it's funny, when we started farming upstate New York, we were the laughing stock of the neighborhood. The big farmers around us, they would come up and till our half acre plots with their big machinery. It took them longer to get there and longer to turn around than actually dig it and do the field work. But after a couple of years, they came back and were asking, what are you guys doing? I mean, what are you guys putting on your pastures? Because the hay keeps getting better every single year. And so being out there, being that example, even if it's only on a half acre, is incredibly important. And so, what you're doing is so important for our industry and our movement. And I can't wait to see what happens in, even 3-5 years down the road in, our community and your community and in the communities around the U.S. because of the steps we're taking today to move this industry forward.
Yeah, I agree completely. You just think about like everything we're finding out about health and dietary issues. It just, in a way, it all seems to be unfolding. And I'm optimistic, at least what I've seen, just in people's excitement. And I think for adapting to a healthy lifestyle, healthy food, and all those sort of things.
Yeah, and this podcast isn't necessarily about, the health side of it, but I'll completely agree with you because, up until a couple of years ago, I really wasn't that convinced that, our diet had that much to do with, obviously the whole aspect of eating healthily, but also really I've started to develop in the last year or two how much actual components of my diet made such a huge difference in how I feel as a person, and that every single person is a little bit different. So like my system right now is not really gluten and dairy are off the table. But when I cut those out, I was shocked at how that made me feel. And then, every so often I'll cheat and go back, and then how I feel after I add those back in. So I think, we are learning so fast at such a rapid pace now in the world about our diets and health in general. I think it's a great time to farm. It's a great time to be alive. And in the next 10, 15, 20 years, I'm just going to be really amazed at different things that are going to come out and help us basically move our food movement forward. So.
If you would have saw me a couple years ago or 3-4 years ago, I don't think you could have believed that I'd be farming now. Farming as natural and sustainable as possible. But how I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and that was shortly after our marriage, and yeah, that will change a person. And you're right. I've seen the effects drastically, and we've been very fortunate that I've been able to combat this issue just with food, no medications or nothing. So I think it's a testimony.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandt, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. Really appreciate you sharing about your farm and your journey into farming. It's been a short one, but it's been amazing where you guys are right now. And I'm just so excited to have you back on in a couple of years and see where this journey takes you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I really enjoyed being on your podcast.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farm